Alright, it is time to finish up this homecoming series. So we are finally on to the last dress of the little homecoming series I've been doing. And so this one I am really excited about. I've had these fabrics for a while and I've been wanting to make this design for a really long time. So I'm really excited to finally be using it in this series. And so all of the dresses from this series have kind of been a progression from the easiest dress to the most complicated dress. So this one is going to be the most intricate one, and this one is going to be very interesting. So it's going to have a lot of like ruffles and pleats in the front, and then it's going to have these like funky little sleeves. And I'm also using some really fun fabrics for it. And so the fabrics I'm working with today all came from Joann's. And the first one that I have is this really pretty embroidered floral fabric, and I have 1.5 yards of this fabric. And so I think I'm just going to be using this one on the skirt, and maybe I'm going to cut some out and use it on the bodice. Or maybe in the sleeves a little bit. And then the second fabric I have is this light pink chiffon fabric, and I bought 2 yards of this one. And I just wanted a color to kind of match the embroidery of this fabric because I think the top is mostly going to be constructed out of this one. And then I also have just this white fabric that I'm going to be using as the lining. And again, I got 2 yards of this one. And I have been working on the patterns for all of the dresses from the homecoming series this time, so this one will also be having a pattern. So hopefully that'll be coming out pretty soon, and once it is, I will of course put it in the description box. And this one's not going to be like a super traditional basic homecoming dress. This one's going to be really fun and exciting, and something kind of different if you want to go for that look. Oh, and it's also going to have a lace-up back, so it's going to be really pretty, really elegant, and I'm just really looking forward to starting it. I started off working with the lining pieces because honestly that's what the bodice is mostly assembled out of. And so I measured all those pieces and cut them all out. And if you guys don't want to follow the measurements I'm going to show you guys, I'm working on the pattern, which should be out hopefully fairly soon. And it's going to have multiple sizing options so you guys can change it to fit you. But I still like to give you guys the measurements as another option. So these are the front pieces, and here we have the center piece and the side piece out of the lining fabrics only. And then this one is the back piece, again just out of the lining fabric. And then this is actually the part that's going to go over the top of those pieces. So we're just cutting out one big rectangle out of the chiffon fabric so we can ruffle it up on top. These pieces here are the sleeve pieces, and again these are just out of the organza. And then this big piece is the skirt lining, and so this one's going to be a circle skirt just out of the lining pieces. And then this is the pattern for the other two skirts because these are going to go on top of the lining piece. And this is cut on the fold, and we're going to cut 2 out of each of our remaining fabrics. Okay, yeah, so this is usually where the voiceovers end, but unfortunately somebody forgot to turn on their mic. So you guys are gonna have to deal with voiceover Allie for a little bit, I'm sorry. Basically what I was explaining here is that the construction for this bodice is going to be a little bit funky compared to what we usually do, because we're going to make an entire bodice out of the lining pieces, and then we're basically going to top stitch the chiffon layers on top of that. So we're going to work on the front of the bodice first, and we're going to take our front center and front side pieces. And as much as I love working on a white on white background, I did put down a tablecloth so you guys can actually see these pieces. So we're going to take our center piece and sew one side piece to it on either side. And we're going to do this for all of the lining pieces. And so you should now have 2 front pieces. The next piece we're going to work on is the back piece, and basically I'm folding over the edge with a little cutout over for 4 inches, and then I'm pinning out a little triangle that's going to be the dart in the back, and the top of the triangle should end at the 7-inch mark. And we're going to do that on all of the back pieces. And this triangle helps the back fit us all nice and snugly. So now I'm taking the front piece and the back pieces and I'm connecting them down the side seams, and the parts that each have these little cutouts are the sides that are going to go together. So I'm just going to pin all those pieces and stitch them together. And once these are stitched, you should have 2 bodice pieces. And the next step is going to be taking these 2 bodice pieces and sewing them together across the top seam to get that finished edge. But before we do this, I actually wanted to change the shape of this piece because I wasn't really happy with it. And so instead of having these kind of triangle shapes over here, I'm going to make it more of a strapless look. So I'm just going to round those out and then make the back edge just a straight line. So I'm going to cut out all of those changes on both of the pieces, and then I'm going to pin them together, matching up all of their seams, and stitch right across the top edge. Alright, guess who remembered to turn on her mic today? Now we should basically have the entire bodice lining done, but next I actually want to add some boning into it to give it a little bit more structure, so that when we add all the chiffon on top of it, it'll help it keep its shape more. So I just cut out 4 pieces of boning that fit down the sides of my bodice. And the boning that I buy just comes in a big roll, but you just iron it to make them nice and flat. And I'm going to round out the top edges so that it doesn't poke a hole in our fabric by accident. And I'm going to take our bodice and I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to take one of my boning pieces and I'm basically just going to top stitch it down onto the side seam of the bodice. And we're going to do this on either side seam and also down the backs, but I'm going to do the backs later because we need to do some other stuff first. Now it is time to finally start working on the chiffon. And so this is the large top piece. And the first thing I did is I took it to the iron and I folded over the edge for 2 inches all the way across the top. And now I'm going to add 2 basting stitches right across this edge. So now I'm going to bring back the lining bodice, and I'm going to take our chiffon, fold it in half, and mark out the center with a pin. And then I'm going to fold either edge into the center and also mark out those corners so we can divide this into quarters. And I'm going to take the center pin first, and I'm going to pin that down on top of the bodice. And I want the edge of the chiffon to go up about 1 inch past where the lining bodice is. And I'm going to do the same thing with the quarters down the side seams. Then after these are all spaced out, I'm going to take 2 of the basting stitches on the same side of the fabric, and I'm going to pull on them to start gathering the fabric up. And now I'm going to top stitch these ruffles down onto the lining bodice, right where the bodice hits. And now that all of the ruffles have been stitched down, we can go ahead and take out those basting stitches. Now I've kind of laid these pieces out as flat as I could, and I'm just going to trim down the bottom here to make this more level. I'm going to add 2 parallel basting stitches across the bottom of this fabric. And now I'm going to pull on the basting stitches and gather up the bottom. And then I'm going to try to get these as flat as I can and pin them down. And once this is all pinned out, I'm going to put a basting stitch across this bottom edge. Now I'm going to put this to the side for a little bit and work on the sleeves. And I think first I'm actually going to put a hem all across this straight edge here. And I'm doing a rolled hem just because I thought it was faster, but any kind of hem would really work. I again took these pieces to the iron and folded over the edge for 2 inches and ironed it all around. And around these curves here, I just kind of folded these over because it's going to be gathered so you're not going to see it. And again, I'm going to put 2 parallel basting stitches across this top edge. And now I'm going to pull on the basting stitches to gather the sleeves up. And once the sleeve has been gathered up to reach 12.5 inches, I'm going to go ahead and put a straight stitch across this ruffled edge. And I'm also going to take a piece of elastic and just straight stitch it down to give this piece a little bit more structure. And then we can again take out the basting stitches. And then I'm going to take the sleeve and I'm going to pin it to our bodice on either side of the side seam here. And I'm just going to put a little top stitch down on either side. And now we have our cute little sleeves. And the last step to do on the bodice is finish up the little back section here, and we want that to be our lace-up section. So I'm going to measure the bottom edge of the bodice, and my waist is 25 inches, so I'm going to mark it where 25 inches hits. And I want the end of my lace-up to be up here because I know that that's going to leave it open a little bit. So now I'm just going to trim down this section on that diagonal. And I'm going to take the two top layers, so one of the chiffon layers and the first lining layer, and I'm going to fold these over together, and I'm going to fold up the back side, and I'm going to pin them together. And I'm going to do that all the way up this piece. And when I get to the top here, I think I'm just going to kind of cut this piece so that I can do a little hem on the top piece and continue folding these over. And for the actual lace-up section, I'm going to use this white trim that I bought a while ago. And I'm going to use this to make the loops, but you could totally use like a ribbon or even grommets down this section if that would be easier for you. This is what I have on hand. So I'm going to cut out a bunch of loops, then melt the edges with a lighter to keep the trim from fraying because it has a very bad tendency to do that. And how many loops you want is totally going to be up to you. I just know that I'm going to want to trim up the bottom quite a bit, so I want to start my loops about here. And I think I'm going to use a total of 4 loops. So I'm going to unpin this little section here so that I can insert one of my loops, and I'm going to pin them to the first 2 layers of the fabric, and I'm going to do that with all of the loops. And before I sew this side to the lining side, I'm actually going to top stitch our boning in away from the raw edge so that we can keep room for the seam allowance, and I'm going to stitch this all the way down the edge. And then once the boning is stitched down, I'm going to fold over the raw edge and put this part on top, and then I'm going to top stitch this all the way down. And then this is what the back should look like. The bodice is done and it is so beautiful, you guys. It's absolutely stunning, and I added the lace up in the back and I am just in love. And now we need to start assembling the skirts. So I have all of the skirt pieces here, and basically I'm just going to take all of the pieces that go together. So the 2 circle skirts, the 2 embroidery layers, and the 2 chiffon pieces, and I'm going to sew those pieces together down their side seams. And we're also going to zigzag their edges so that they don't fray. So now to make room for the zippers, I'm going to take all of the skirt pieces and fold them in half and cut a 9-inch slit into the back. Next, around the 2 rectangle skirt pieces, so the embroidered piece and the chiffon, I'm going to put 2 parallel basting stitches across either top edge. And now we can start gathering up both of these layers onto the lining skirt. And once these are all pinned, we can put a basting stitch around the waist to hold them all together. And now we're going to sew the skirt to the bodice, but before we do that we need to cut down the boning so we don't hit it while we're sewing them. And I added a second basting stitch around the bodice right above where I want to sew. So I'm going to cut this piece down below the basting stitches. And where the boning is, I'm going to fold these pieces up and trim it down and round it out so we won't hit it. And now I'm going to pin and sew these pieces together. And now we can add a zigzag stitch all around the waistband, trim it down, and also take out all of the basting stitches. And I'm just going to go ahead and add in the invisible zipper down the back of the skirt right where it hits the bodice. And all that is left to do on the dress is to add a hem around the lining and chiffon skirts, and then the embroidered one, I'm just going to trim it down until it's the length that I want it. And now we are finally on to the big reveal of the last homecoming dress. had so much fun with this dress, you guys. I think it's really different from like the typical homecoming style dresses. So I think it just really stands out, and honestly, I just feel like a total fairy in this dress. Who doesn't love like a corset style lace up back? And the flower pattern on the skirt is just so pretty, and I love mixing these fabrics to add a little bit more interest. But my biggest obsession might be the sleeves. They're just so cute and dainty. Alright, well that wraps up my mini homecoming series. I really hope you guys liked all of the dresses, and if you guys decide to make them, please send me pictures on Instagram. I love seeing them, and hopefully all of the patterns will be out for them fairly soon. And I have a really fun project planned out for next week, so I hope you guys stay tuned because I'm going to be making some Met Gala looks now. So get excited, you guys. I am so pumped. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Stay safe. I love you guys, and I will see you guys next Friday. Bye!